They say love can endure anything: pain, betrayal, even mistakes. I used to believe that too. I thought my marriage was strong enough to withstand the storms life threw at us. But then, I made a decision that changed everything. I cheated on my husband, and I had a child as a result of that affair. It wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal so deep it left a permanent scar on our marriage. But the moment I truly fell out of love with my husband wasn't when I confessed, or even when he forgave me. It was when he refused to sign my son's birth certificate, the child I had with another man. That was the moment I realized I didn't know him at all. I know what you're thinking. How could I blame him? How could I expect him to do something so humiliating, so degrading? But the truth is, love is messy. It doesn't follow rules, and it doesn't make sense. And in the end, his refusal wasn't just about the birth certificate. It was about everything our marriage had become. It was about who we were and who we weren't anymore. When I first met my husband, Andrew, I thought he was everything I'd ever wanted. He was kind, reliable, and steady in a way that made me feel safe. For years, we built a life together, a beautiful home, successful careers, and a love I thought could survive anything. But somewhere along the way, that love started to fade. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches or slammed doors. It was a slow erosion, a quiet loss that neither of us wanted to acknowledge. We fell into a routine, a predictable rhythm that felt more like a business arrangement than a marriage. The intimacy we once had, the spark that brought us together, was gone. And though I told myself I was happy, deep down, I felt hollow, unseen, unloved. And that's when I met Daniel. Daniel was everything Andrew wasn't. He was wild, passionate, and completely unpredictable. He made me feel things I hadn't felt in years: excitement, desire, and most of all, alive. At first, it was just harmless flirtation. A way to feel attractive again, to remind myself that I was still desirable. But it didn't stay harmless for long. One night, after a particularly heated argument with Andrew, I found myself at Daniel's apartment. I told myself I was just going to talk, to vent about my marriage and all the things I felt I couldn't say to my husband. But the moment I walked through that door, I knew talking was the last thing on my mind. What happened that night changed everything. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was betraying Andrew in the worst possible way. But in that moment, I didn't care. All I could think about was how good it felt to be wanted again, to feel passion instead of indifference. After that night, I told myself it would never happen again. I swore I would put Daniel behind me and focus on my marriage. But secrets have a way of unraveling even the best intentions. Weeks turned into months, and before I knew it, I was standing in front of my bathroom mirror, staring at a positive pregnancy test. Panic hit me like a freight train. My mind raced with a million questions, but one thought rose above the rest. It's not Andrew's. I knew the timing didn't add up. I knew the baby wasn't his, and I knew I couldn't keep this secret forever. When I finally worked up the courage to tell Andrew, his reaction was exactly what I expected, and everything I feared. At first, he was quiet, his face unreadable as he processed what I'd just told him. Then, the questions started. How could you do this to me? Who is he? How long has this been going on? I answered as honestly as I could, but no answer was good enough. Nothing could undo what I had done. For weeks, our home was a war zone. Andrew couldn't look at me without anger flashing in his eyes. Every conversation turned into a fight, and every fight ended with the same question: why? But despite everything, he didn't leave. He said he wanted to try to make it work, for the sake of our marriage, and for the sake of the baby. For a while, I thought we could fix it. I thought we could move past the betrayal and find our way back to each other. But the closer my due date came, the more the cracks in our relationship started to show. Every time I mentioned the baby, Andrew's jaw would tighten. Every time I asked for his opinion on names or nursery colors, he would brush me off. It was like he had already decided the baby wasn't his problem. even though he had agreed to raise him as his own. When my son was born, I thought everything would change. I thought Andrew would see him and fall in love, the way I had the moment I held him in my arms. But instead, Andrew kept his distance. He barely looked at the baby, let alone held him. And when the nurse brought in the birth certificate for us to sign, his response left me speechless. "I'm not signing that," he said, his voice cold and final. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean you're not signing it? We agreed." "No," he interrupted, his tone sharper now. "You agreed. I never said I would put my name on something that isn't mine." His words hit me like a slap. I knew he was angry, that he felt betrayed, but this was something else. This wasn't just about the birth certificate. This was about him drawing a line in the sand, about him punishing me for what I had done. In that moment, something inside me broke. I realized that the man I had married, the man who had promised to love me through anything, was gone. Or maybe he had never been there at all. I had asked him for forgiveness, for understanding, and instead, he had given me conditions. He would stay, but only if it was on his terms. He would raise my son, but only if he didn't have to acknowledge him as his own. It wasn't love. It was control. Over the next few months, things only got worse. Every time I looked at Andrew, I saw the resentment in his eyes, the bitterness he couldn't hide. And every time he looked at my son, I saw the distance, the refusal to let himself care. It was like living with a stranger, someone I used to know but no longer recognized. I tried to make it work. I tried to bridge the gap between us, to bring back the love we had lost. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Andrew had built a wall around himself, and I wasn't sure I wanted to tear it down anymore. Because the truth was, I had fallen out of love with him. It wasn't just the birth certificate. It wasn't just the affair. It was everything. It was the years of feeling invisible, of being taken for granted. It was the way he had turned my mistake into a weapon, a way to punish me instead of trying to understand why I had made it in the first place. One night, as I sat alone in the nursery, rocking my son to sleep, I made a decision. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't stay in a marriage that had become a prison, a constant reminder of my worst mistakes. The next morning, I told Andrew I wanted a divorce. He didn't fight me. He didn't try to convince me to stay. He just nodded, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. And maybe he had. The divorce was messy, as I knew it would be. We fought over everything: money, the house, custody. But in the end, we both got what we wanted. He got his freedom, and I got mine. Now, as I look at my son, I feel a mixture of guilt and gratitude. Guilt for the choices I made, for the pain I caused. Gratitude for the chance to start over, to build a new life for us. A life where I could be honest, with myself and with the people I love. I don't regret leaving Andrew. I don't regret walking away from a marriage that had already died long before I made the decision to end it. But I do regret the way I hurt him. The way I let my own unhappiness destroy the trust we had built. They say love can endure anything, but that's not true. Love can't survive without trust, without forgiveness, without understanding. And once those things are gone, no amount of love can bring them back.